Hello. Tonight you wander into a world that still exists beneath every modern city, hidden under highways, apartment towers, and glowing streetlights. Before kings carve names into stone, the Tigris and Euphrates rest quietly, while unseen empires sleep beneath ancient starlit mud. The plains around you feel wide and peaceful, like an ocean that quietly forgot how to move beneath the stars. Wet soil rests beside shallow water channels, while thin reeds sway gently within the cool night breeze. Far above, migrating birds drift silently through darkness, carrying traces of distant rain and river clay. Geologists studying Mesopotamia believe the region remains wetter nearly 6,000 years ago than it appears today. Seasonal floods leave fertile mud across the valley floor, allowing farming communities to emerge slowly beside calm waterways. You can almost picture early settlers studying the land carefully, like people assembling furniture without instructions late at night. So, before you get completely comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you truly enjoy what we're creating here. And while the rivers continue moving slowly beneath the stars, feel free to share your local time and where you are listening tonight. Somewhere else, another listener may also be awake beside a quiet window, hearing this story while rain touches the glass or a fan hums softly through darkness. Now slowly dim the lights. Perhaps turn on a fan, letting the steady hum of the air fill the room. And in that gentle rhythm, we quietly step into tonight's journey together. You begin walking beside one of the earliest natural canals formed by the restless movement of floodwater. The mud beneath your feet feels cool and smooth, pressed flat by centuries of quiet erosion. Archaeologists have discovered traces of Sumerian settlements near these waterways, where communities once gathered around dependable water sources long before walls or palaces interrupted the horizon. The night sky above Mesopotamia feels impossibly vast, untouched by electric light or modern noise drifting across crowded cities. Stars scatter through darkness like grains of salt resting upon black stone. Ancient people likely memorized these constellations carefully for planting seasons and river travel. One exhausted farmer probably wishes mosquitoes migrate alongside the birds overhead. Nearby reeds rustle softly while wind drifts across wetlands beneath the cool darkness of evening. Small fish disturb shallow pools remaining after seasonal floods retreat slowly into distant river channels. Geological evidence suggests these rivers repeatedly change direction across thousands of years, reshaping the valley gradually. The earth never stands completely still beneath human history here. You continue forward through soft sediment deposited patiently year after year beside overflowing rivers and wetlands. Each layer preserves fragments of forgotten seasons, compressed beneath newer soil across centuries. Scientists studying these sediments trace ancient climate patterns hidden deep beneath the valley floor. It feels comforting knowing Earth stores memories more carefully than most people remember complicated passwords today. In the distance, you notice faint traces of early footpaths winding beside shallow irrigation channels. These narrow routes are not roads yet, only repeated movements pressed into wet earth by careful human steps. Historians believe early Sumerian communities slowly organized around predictable water systems rather than military conquest. Survival begins quietly here, shaped more by observation than by ambition or dramatic declarations beneath waving banners. The rivers themselves dominate everything around you. The Tigris moves faster, colder, and slightly less predictable, while the Euphrates flows with broader and calmer rhythms across the valley. Ancient settlements often formed where both rivers could be carefully managed through small canals. Water becomes the earliest form of silent power, more valuable than gold, marble, or polished royal crowns resting inside future palaces. As moonlight reflects softly across the water, you notice how empty the landscape still appears beneath the stars tonight. No towering walls interrupt the horizon, and no temples rise above the reeds. Yet within this quiet simplicity rests the beginning of urban life, emerging naturally like moss spreading slowly across damp stones beside gardens. Archaeologists studying ancient pollen preserved within Mesopotamian soil discovered evidence of thick marsh vegetation and broad seasonal grasses near early settlements. These findings suggest the valley supports large bird and fish populations alongside farming communities. You can almost hear distant wings overhead, while insects hum softly through darkness beside the wetlands tonight. You move slowly beside primitive homes built from mud brick hardened beneath the hot afternoon sun each season. The structures remain modest and practical, designed mainly for shelter rather than beauty or status. Smoke drifts from cooking fires, while clay jars rest beside quiet doorways. Nearby, one exhausted worker probably already regrets volunteering to organize grain storage for everyone. The silence surrounding these settlements feels deep, though never entirely empty, beneath the enormous starlit sky tonight. Water laps gently against muddy riverbanks, while reeds whisper beneath passing evening winds. No empires exist here yet, no marble monuments or formal borders. Instead, you witness patient habits forming gradually across generations beside dependable rivers and fertile wetlands. Historians often describe Mesopotamia as the cradle of civilization, though the phrase sometimes sounds larger than the reality itself. Civilization begins with ordinary routines repeated consistently through time. Someone repairs a fishing net, while another shapes wet clay into storage containers beside shallow water channels. In many ways, the earliest city planners resemble modern neighbors, arguing politely about drainage problems during community meetings. Nobody actually enjoys attending. You continue walking through cool darkness, while faint stars shimmer across slow canals beside silent wetlands. Future kingdoms already rest invisibly beneath soft mud and quiet water, waiting for centuries of patient labor and adaptation. Tonight, the valley remains untouched. Earth and water continue their endless conversation gently beneath the pale, ancient moonlight above. Far ahead, where rivers disappear slowly into shadow, future cities remain hidden beneath layers of untouched soil tonight. Generations will someday build temples, roads, walls, and crowded markets across these quiet plains, though none exist yet beneath the silent sky. For now, there is only wind, water, mud, and softly waiting darkness beside rivers. The Nile moves beside you with a calmness that feels almost deliberate, as though the river already understands the civilizations waiting patiently along its banks. Dark water slides quietly between ancient sandstone cliffs, while silver moonlight stretches across the current in long, trembling ribbons. The valley breathes slowly beneath the stars, carrying the scent of wet earth, reeds, and distant flowering plants. Unlike the restless rivers of Mesopotamia, the Nile follows a remarkably dependable rhythm through the Egyptian landscape. Each year, seasonal floods spread rich black silt across the valley floor, renewing farmland with careful consistency. Ancient historians often describe Egypt as a gift from the Nile itself. You begin understanding why people trusted this river almost the way modern travelers trust weather apps. Archaeologists studying early Egyptian settlements discovered that many communities were carefully organized around predictable flood patterns. Homes, storage buildings, and irrigation systems often followed natural elevations shaped by earlier floods. Human planning slowly adapted to the river's cycles rather than resisting them directly. The result feels less like conquering nature and more like entering a quiet agreement beside moving water. You walk slowly along a narrow dirt pathway raised slightly above surrounding farmland. The ground feels firm beneath your feet after centuries of repeated use. Small canals branch outward from the Nile like veins carrying life into the valley. Water glimmers softly beneath moonlight while insects hum gently among papyrus reeds. Somewhere nearby, frogs continue their endless nighttime conversation with admirable commitment and absolutely no interruptions. The first Egyptian towns emerge gradually from these fertile riverbanks. Mud brick homes gather close together for shade and protection from seasonal heat. Nearby granaries store wheat and barley harvested after the floodwaters retreat each year. Historians believe organized grain storage becomes one of the foundations of Egyptian stability. Even ancient civilizations understand the comforting emotional power of knowing snacks remain safely available nearby. You continue deeper into one of these early settlements, while warm evening air drifts softly through narrow streets. Clay jars rest beside doorways, while woven baskets hang from wooden beams overhead. Faint traces of cooking fires linger in the air. The city feels orderly without becoming rigid, shaped by practical routines repeated patiently through many generations beneath the slow movement of the stars. In ancient Egypt, flood cycles determined nearly every aspect of daily life. Farmers plant crops after the waters recede, builders repair canals during dry months, and officials carefully measure river levels using structures called nilometers. Some nilometers still survive today near temples and stone stairways. You imagine exhausted administrators staring nervously at water measurements, like modern people refreshing financial graphs late at night. The sandstone cliffs surrounding the valley glow softly beneath fading moonlight and drifting desert wind tonight. Fine dust moves across worn pathways while distant palms sway gently beside the water's edge. Geological studies suggest the Nile Valley remains remarkably stable across thousands of years. Stability itself becomes a quiet form of wealth, shaping every layer of society. You pass long storage buildings constructed carefully from sun-dried mud brick beside the quiet Nile tonight. Inside these cool, dark spaces, grain remains protected from moisture and severe heat. Egyptian officials track supplies using early written accounting upon papyrus and clay surfaces. Empires often begin simply with people organizing surprisingly large amounts of wheat efficiently together. The river reflects the stars so clearly that sky and water seem briefly connected beneath the cool darkness tonight. Boats drift slowly along the current carrying stone, timber, and woven textiles between settlements beside the Nile. Trade develops quietly through predictable transportation routes. Even moving goods feels calm and measured, like breathing slowly before peaceful sleep arrives gently. As you continue walking, you notice architecture responding carefully to harsh climate conditions throughout the quiet settlement tonight. Thick mud brick walls keep interiors cool during scorching afternoons, while flat rooftops capture evening breezes after sunset. Egyptian homes often center around shaded courtyards, proving comfortable living spaces matter long before modern air conditioning becomes humanity's greatest invention. The farther south you travel beside the Nile, the more clearly river and settlement connect beside fertile land. Villages rise where irrigation functions most effectively, while farmland stretches outward beside maintained canals. Archaeological evidence suggests communities cooperate closely during flood seasons, repairing waterways together, much like neighbors bonding reluctantly during inconvenient apartment plumbing disasters. You pause beside a temple construction site where workers shape limestone blocks beneath fading evening light near the riverbank. Early Egyptian religious structures often align carefully with celestial movements and seasonal flood patterns. Priests observe stars while architects study shifting shadows throughout the year. Spiritual belief and practical engineering become naturally intertwined within daily life here. Night settles fully across the valley now, softening outlines of distant fields, canals, and quiet stone buildings beneath darkness. Oil lamps flicker behind narrow windows while the Nile continues moving endlessly through the sleeping city. Nothing feels hurried here. Every granary, pathway, and canal contributes gently to the larger rhythm surrounding the river and fertile valley. Historians often marvel at how long Egyptian civilization remains remarkably stable compared to many neighboring cultures. Part of this endurance comes from geography, climate, and reliable agricultural cycles supported by the Nile. Yet another part emerges from careful planning repeated consistently across generations. Stability, you begin noticing, rarely arrives through dramatic moments. It grows slowly from ordinary systems functioning properly beneath quiet skies. You continue beside the riverbank while cool air rises softly from the dark water below tonight. The stars overhead remain unchanged from those seen by travelers thousands of years earlier. Nearby families sleep peacefully while grain rests safely within sealed storage rooms. The city breathes calmly beside the Nile through dependable nightly routines and quiet, familiar rhythms. Far beyond the sleeping settlement, the Nile continues northward through darkness toward distant cities, still waiting to emerge beside fertile waters. Temples, roads, harbors, and monuments will someday rise along these banks. Yet tonight, everything remains calm beneath silent stars while the river carries dark, fertile silt steadily forward through the ancient valley below. You arrive at Mohenjo-Daro in the soft blue hour before sunrise, when the streets still hold the coolness of night and the air feels pleasantly still against your skin. The city rests quietly beside the Indus River, ordered with unusual precision for a settlement more than 4,000 years old. Even from a distance, the arrangement feels calm, balanced, and deeply intentional. The streets stretch outward in clean, straight lines, crossing each other at measured angles like threads woven carefully into fabric. Archaeologists studying the city remain fascinated by how consistently its neighborhoods follow organized planning principles. Homes, wells, drainage systems, and public buildings fit together with remarkable order. You quietly suspect modern drivers would still manage getting lost here, despite the excellent street layout. As you continue walking, you notice rows of baked brick homes standing close beside narrow lanes. The bricks themselves follow standardized measurements throughout the city, suggesting careful regulation and skilled craftsmanship. Historians believe Mohenjo-Daro may have housed tens of thousands of residents during its height. Yet despite its size, the settlement feels surprisingly peaceful, shaped more by coordination than by displays of royal power. One of the most remarkable features lies beneath your feet. Sophisticated underground drainage channels run beneath nearly every major street, carrying wastewater away from homes and communal areas. Covered brick sewers connect carefully to smaller household drains with thoughtful engineering precision. In many parts of the ancient world, sanitation remains primitive for centuries afterward. Here, clean water management quietly becomes part of everyday urban life. You pause beside a narrow staircase leading into a modest home. Inside, small rooms remain cool despite the growing warmth outside. Thick brick walls protect interiors from intense daytime heat, while flat roofs provide additional working space above. Clay jars rest silently near the walls, exactly where archaeologists once uncovered them. The stillness inside feels strangely intimate, as though the residents stepped away only moments ago. The city awakens gradually as sunlight spreads across the rooftops. Merchants begin arranging goods inside market spaces while workers carry baskets along shaded pathways. No enormous palaces dominate the skyline, and no colossal statues celebrate individual rulers. Historians still debate whether Mohenjo-Daro possessed kings in the traditional sense at all. Authority here seems quieter, expressed through systems functioning smoothly rather than through dramatic displays of personal power. You continue toward the Great Bath, among the city's most famous surviving structures beneath the afternoon sky today. Carefully sealed brickwork surrounds a large rectangular pool connected to sophisticated water systems. Researchers believe the space serves ceremonial purposes. Ancient builders probably inspect leaks with the same exhausted frustration modern homeowners reserve for strange plumbing noises. The surrounding streets remain remarkably orderly as the day unfolds quietly across the city beneath warm sunlight today. Wastewater disappears through covered drains while public wells provide dependable access to clean water throughout neighborhoods. Archaeological evidence suggests many homes include private bathing areas. Urban planning here supports daily comfort and hygiene instead of displaying wealth alone. As afternoon sunlight settles across the city, baked brick surfaces glow warmly beneath the pale open sky today. Narrow alleyways create shaded pockets where cool air lingers pleasantly against the heat. Footsteps echo softly against packed earth while distant voices drift through courtyards. The city's rhythm feels measured and steady, like peaceful breathing beside open windows. Historians remain fascinated by the relative stability of the Indus Valley civilization across many centuries. Unlike several neighboring cultures, evidence of large-scale warfare appears surprisingly limited within many Indus cities. Defensive fortifications exist, but monumental battle scenes or royal conquest inscriptions remain rare. The civilization seems focused more on trade, infrastructure, and coordinated urban living. Even ancient empires, it seems, occasionally prefer spreadsheets over dramatic battlefield speeches. You pass workshops where artisans shape carnelian beads and carve small seals decorated with animals and mysterious symbols carefully tonight. Thousands of these seals appear across the Indus Valley in distant regions, suggesting extensive trade networks. Yet the writing system remains undeciphered today, leaving entire conversations sleeping silently inside unknown symbols still. As evening approaches, cooler air begins flowing gently through the streets and rooftops once more tonight. Families gather above brick homes while oil lamps flicker softly below. Water continues moving through hidden channels beneath the city, unnoticed through constant reliability. You briefly wonder whether residents complain endlessly about drainage repairs during exhausting civic meetings. The city's carefully planned layout creates a subtle sense of calm as you continue walking tonight. Streets remain wide enough for movement, while residential districts blend naturally beside workshops and marketplaces. Public wells appear regularly throughout neighborhoods, reducing long walks for water collection. Urban order here feels thoughtful, steady, and quietly consistent across generations without chaos. Archaeologists studying sediment near the Indus River suggest changing flood patterns eventually contribute to this civilization's gradual transformation over centuries. Environmental shifts likely alter farming systems and settlement patterns slowly through time. Yet tonight, the city still thrives beneath darkening skies, while trade routes remain active and water flows steadily beneath carefully planned streets. You pause beside a quiet courtyard where ceramic pots remain stacked neatly against a warm brick wall tonight. Moonlight touches their curved surfaces while evening air drifts gently overhead through the sleeping city. The moment feels deeply human despite the centuries separating your world from theirs. Someone once carries these same vessels through nearby streets daily. The stars above Mohenjo-Daro brighten slowly, while the city settles into calm nighttime stillness beneath clear skies tonight. Nearby footsteps echo faintly across brick pathways before fading gently into silence once more. Beneath the streets, water continues moving through hidden drains and channels, while the city itself seems to breathe quietly together beneath ordinary daily routines and careful design. Far beyond the sleeping rooftops, the Indus River continues moving patiently through darkness toward distant, unseen settlements tonight. Centuries later, many details about this civilization will remain mysterious, though its quiet intelligence still feels unmistakable. In Mohenjo-Daro, power reveals itself through balance, order, flowing water, footsteps, sunlight, and the gentle repetition of time itself. You step quietly onto a Roman road stretching across the countryside beneath a pale evening sky. Flat stone slabs fit tightly together beneath your feet, worn smooth by centuries of carts, sandals, horses, and drifting dust. The road continues far beyond the horizon with calm determination. Even now, in the fading light, it feels less like construction and more like a patient promise. At its height, the Roman Empire maintains more than 400,000 kilometers of roads connecting distant provinces, villages, ports, and military outposts. Historians often describe these roads as the veins of the empire itself. Messages, grain, marble, olive oil, and travelers move steadily across them every day. Somewhere nearby, an exhausted mule probably questions whether imperial expansion is truly worth carrying another shipment uphill. You continue forward, while cool evening air settles gently across the landscape. Moss-covered milestones rise beside the road at measured intervals, each carved carefully with distances and imperial names. Some still stand today after nearly 2,000 years of weather and silence. The stones feel strangely calm beneath the moonlight, as though they stopped counting distance long ago and simply accepted the slow passing of time. The road leads toward a modest Roman town surrounded by low walls and olive groves. Warm light flickers from narrow windows while smoke drifts softly above tiled rooftops. The city does not feel loud or hurried. Instead, it hums quietly beneath the darkening sky, supported by routines repeated carefully every day. Order here arrives through maintenance, schedules, and roads extending steadily outward in every direction. You pass beneath a stone archway and enter narrow streets lined with shops and apartment buildings. The paving stones beneath your feet remain cool from the approaching night. Ancient Roman cities often follow carefully planned grid systems influenced by military camp layouts. Main streets intersect at deliberate angles designed for movement and visibility. You suspect Roman surveyors would probably become extremely enthusiastic about modern laser measuring tools. Nearby, steam rises gently from a public bathhouse where warm light spills across the street. Inside, water echoes softly against stone walls, while tired workers relax after long days of labor. Roman baths serve not only for hygiene, but also for conversation, business, and social gathering. Engineers construct complex heating systems beneath the floors themselves. Even ancient civilizations eventually discover the deeply universal joy of warm floors during cold evenings. The scent of olive oil, damp stone, and wood smoke drifts through the surrounding streets. Merchants close their market stalls slowly, while lamps begin appearing beside doorways and public squares. The sounds remain soft and distant, never fully disappearing, but never becoming overwhelming either. The city feels balanced between movement and stillness, like gentle waves crossing dark water beneath a quiet harbor sky after sunset. Roman planners carefully designed many cities so sunlight aligns with principal streets during specific seasons or times of year. Ancient architectural texts describe methods for orienting urban layouts according to winds, climate, and solar movement. You imagine surveyors studying shadows carefully while discussing geometry beneath broad hats. Urban planning here feels surprisingly thoughtful, though someone certainly still complains about road repairs during inconvenient weather conditions. You continue toward the forum where columns rise pale beneath the growing darkness. Public squares remain central to Roman urban life, serving as spaces for trade, administration, announcements, and gatherings. Yet tonight the forum feels calm and nearly empty, except for scattered footsteps echoing softly between stone surfaces. The silence carries a comforting weight, as though the city itself has learned how to rest without completely sleeping. Farther along the street, aqueduct water flows quietly into fountains carved from limestone and marble. Roman engineers transport fresh water across astonishing distances using carefully calculated gradients and gravity alone. Some aqueduct systems continue functioning centuries after the empire itself declines. Watching the water move steadily through carved channels, you begin understanding how infrastructure quietly outlives many rulers, speeches, and military victories throughout history. The road leaving the city remains visible beneath weak moonlight, stretching quietly across the countryside tonight. Traders continue arriving from distant provinces carrying spices, fabrics, ceramics, and glassware throughout the Roman world. Inns appear regularly beside major routes supporting travelers. In many ways, the empire resembles a vast transportation schedule, occasionally interrupted by dramatic hairstyles. You pause beside a weathered stone bench near a crossroads where travelers rest before continuing onward tonight. The countryside glows silver beneath the stars, while insects hum softly among nearby grasses. Roads like these reduce isolation between communities, allowing languages, customs, and ideas to travel steadily across enormous distances through repeated patient human contact. As midnight approaches, the city grows quieter still. Lamps flicker behind curtains while distant footsteps fade gradually into silence. The roads remain empty except for occasional wagons moving slowly beneath the moon. Yet even in stillness, the infrastructure continues performing its quiet work. Water flows through aqueducts, drains carry runoff beneath streets, and milestones wait calmly beside roads that never truly stop connecting distant lives. Historians often credit Roman roads with strengthening imperial control across vast territories, but their influence reaches beyond military movement alone. These routes encourage commerce, education, communication, and cultural exchange over generations. A paved road alters daily existence in subtle, lasting ways. You quietly realize most people throughout history probably care less about conquest itself than whether deliveries arrive before dinner becomes disappointingly late again. You walk beyond the city gates where cypress trees line the roadside beneath quiet fields of stars tonight. The road stretches steadily through valleys, hills, and sleeping villages, hidden within darkness. Every stone reflects centuries of labor and engineering. The empire feels enormous, though its greatest strength appears gentle, expressed through reliability rather than spectacle or fear. Far ahead, other roads branch toward unseen provinces beside distant seas and mountain ranges beneath the night sky tonight. Lamps flicker softly within settlements separated by weeks of travel, yet connected through the same enduring network. Time itself begins feeling slower here, stretched across stone pathways and measured footsteps, while roads continue patiently through darkness, mile after mile. You stand beneath a pale Central Asian sky where the wind moves slowly across endless grasslands fading toward distant horizons. The air feels dry against your skin, carrying traces of dust, cold stone, and sunburned earth. Somewhere far away, Camel bells echo faintly through the silence. The landscape appears empty at first glance, though countless migrations quietly begin here beneath drifting clouds and restless stars. By the late centuries of antiquity, climate patterns across parts of Central Asia gradually become drier and less predictable. Modern researchers studying lake sediments and tree rings believe even subtle environmental shifts influence the movement of entire populations over long periods. Grasslands shrink slowly, while water sources become unreliable. History rarely changes direction all at once. Usually it sighs softly first, almost too quietly for anyone nearby to notice. You begin walking beside a caravan, moving carefully across the open steppe. Camels sway gently beneath heavy bundles of cloth, salt, spices, and grain, while riders wrap themselves against drifting dust. Hooves leave shallow marks across the dry ground, though wind gradually erases them within hours. The desert remains wonderfully efficient at cleaning up after travelers, unlike certain modern kitchens after someone attempts baking without supervision. The caravan follows trade routes shaped over centuries by geography and seasonal movement rather than by political borders alone. Wells, grazing lands, and mountain passes determine where people travel safely across these enormous distances. Ancient merchants memorized these pathways with astonishing precision. A forgotten water source here can matter more than the rise or fall of distant rulers sitting comfortably inside decorated palaces many weeks away. As evening approaches, the temperature drops quickly beneath a silver-blue sky. Travelers gather near small fires, while camels kneel quietly beside scattered bundles. The silence surrounding the camp feels enormous yet strangely peaceful. Historians often focus on battles and dynasties, but most human movement throughout history happens slowly, through families searching for reliable water, grazing land, or simply calmer places to sleep each night. Farther east, nomadic groups begin shifting gradually across the steppe as environmental pressures alter migration patterns over time. Some historians believe these movements indirectly influence political changes affecting Persia, China, and parts of Europe. Tiny fluctuations in rainfall accumulate across generations. Civilization often resembles a quiet chain reaction, caused gradually by inconvenient weather patterns unfolding across generations slowly. You continue traveling beneath a fading sunset, while dry grasses whisper softly beside the caravan path tonight. Dust settles onto clothing, leather straps, and wooden wheels, while horses graze carefully near a shrinking stream. Ancient travelers become skilled at reading landscapes closely. Modern people usually notice environmental change only after cafes charge extra for oat milk. The trade routes crossing Central Asia remain active despite harsh environmental conditions across the dry landscape today. Silk, jade, spices, manuscripts, and metalwork continue moving between distant civilizations through networks later called the Silk Road. Yet these exchanges depend entirely upon fragile ecological balance shaped constantly by rivers, rainfall, and climate itself. You pause beside a weathered stone marker, half buried beneath drifting sand and dry wind tonight. The carving has nearly vanished after centuries of exposure to changing temperatures and storms. Travelers once trust this marker confidently while crossing familiar territory. Landscapes themselves shift quietly across generations, redrawing invisible boundaries beneath enormous skies and silence. At night, the stars above the steppe appear incredibly sharp against the cold open darkness surrounding the caravan tonight. Travelers navigate through constellations while listening to animals resting nearby beneath the vast sky. Climate records suggest prolonged droughts repeatedly affect grazing patterns across centuries, subtly influencing political stability far beyond the grasslands and distant settlements themselves. Historians studying the migrations of Huns, Turkic peoples, and other nomadic groups increasingly recognize environmental stress as one factor among many shaping historical movement. No single drought creates an empire, and no single storm destroys one entirely. Instead, change accumulates gradually through repeated pressures. Human societies adapt, reorganize, relocate, and continue moving forward like rivers, quietly adjusting course around stones over very long distances. You continue beside the caravan while dawn light spreads slowly across the horizon in pale bands of silver and gold. The camels rise carefully from the ground while travelers secure supplies for another day of movement across the dry frontier. There is no sense of panic here, only endurance shaped through repetition. Survival depends less on speed than on patience, memory, and understanding the rhythm of difficult landscapes. The farther you travel, the more the environment itself feels like the story's quiet central character tonight. Cities rise and fall beyond distant horizons, yet the land remains constant in its demands. Water must be found, animals must graze, and seasons continue changing regardless of human ambition beneath shifting caravan trails. You pass abandoned campsites where traces of earlier travelers remain scattered quietly across the dry sand tonight. Broken pottery glimmers faintly beneath morning light, while old fire pits collect drifting dust. Entire communities once pause here before continuing toward distant rivers and markets. History leaves soft footprints despite the loud, dramatic stories textbooks often prefer telling afterward across generations. As afternoon heat settles across the plains, the caravan slows slightly to preserve energy and valuable water supplies. Cloth banners flutter weakly in the dry wind, while wheels creak rhythmically over packed earth. No dramatic turning point appears here. Instead, countless small decisions gradually redirect migration, trade, and political influence across generations over time. You lift your eyes toward distant mountains barely visible through pale dust and shimmering afternoon heat today. Somewhere beyond them, other settlements continue adapting to the same environmental changes, unfolding quietly across the continent. Farmers adjust irrigation while merchants choose safer roads, gradually reshaping civilizations beneath the wide, indifferent sky stretching endlessly above. Far behind the caravan, wind already smooths away tracks left earlier across the dry frontier today. Sand drifts gently over the ground while silence returns once more beneath enormous skies. History rarely arrives suddenly here. The deepest transformations begin quietly through rainfall, migration, temperature, and time, moving like hidden rivers beneath ancient earth. You arrive in a Han Dynasty city just as evening settles softly across tiled rooftops and painted wooden gates. Lantern light glows gently along wide avenues, while cool air drifts through carefully planned streets. Everything appears balanced with deliberate intention. The city does not rise chaotically from the land. Instead, it seems placed carefully within the landscape, like a stone resting naturally beside calm, flowing water. During the Han Dynasty, many Chinese cities are designed according to principles connected to astronomy, balance, and early forms of feng shui. Palaces often stand near central axes intended to harmonize earthly government with celestial order above. Architects study wind direction, sunlight, and terrain carefully before construction begins. Even ancient officials apparently understand the emotional importance of placing important buildings somewhere aesthetically pleasing and slightly intimidating at the same time. You walk slowly beneath a long wooden corridor where oil lamps flicker behind thin paper screens tonight. Polished floorboards creak softly beneath measured footsteps, while distant bells echo faintly through cool air. Government clerks copy tax records onto bamboo slips using black ink brushes, their movements steady as rainfall, tapping quietly against rooftops. The empire stretches across enormous distances, yet much of its stability depends upon ordinary administrative routines repeated carefully each day. Officials record harvests, supervise canals, organize grain storage, and maintain transportation routes between provinces. Power here feels practical rather than theatrical. Most governments survive because exhausted people continue updating paperwork despite inconvenient weather conditions. Outside the administrative quarter, markets remain active beneath hanging lanterns and drifting smoke from cooking fires tonight. Merchants arrange ceramics, tea, spices, silk, and lacquerware beneath wooden awnings, while travelers speak quietly beside crowded food stalls. Trade flows through the city with remarkable consistency, like water moving steadily through carefully maintained irrigation channels nearby. You continue toward the city gates where caravans arrive carrying horses, jade, glassware, and woven textiles from Western territories tonight. Historians later call these networks the Silk Road, though countless interconnected routes cross deserts and mountains together. Even global influence often spreads more through reliable shipping systems than dramatic speeches delivered loudly from balconies. The scent of tea drifts softly through cool evening air, while travelers rest within roadside inns near busy marketplaces tonight. Hot water simmers quietly over small fires as merchants discuss weather, prices, and dangerous road conditions together. Somewhere nearby, an exhausted camel handler probably calculates whether transporting silk remains worthwhile after accounting for mountain snow and stubborn goats. You leave crowded market streets behind and continue toward the Palace District near the city's central axis tonight. Wide courtyards open beneath moonlight, while symmetrical walls create quiet order throughout surrounding grounds. Han planners emphasize alignment and spatial harmony carefully. Architecture reflects political philosophy here, expressing stability through measured proportion instead of excessive decoration or grandeur. Astronomers during the Han period study celestial movements closely, believing harmony between heaven and earth influences political legitimacy and social balance. Court scholars observe eclipses, seasonal patterns, and planetary motion while recording findings carefully for imperial authorities. You quietly suspect ancient astronomers occasionally wish clouds cooperate more respectfully during important nighttime observations. You pause beside a reflecting pool where moonlight trembles softly across dark water bordered by smooth stone pathways. Bamboo rustles gently nearby while distant music drifts faintly through open courtyards. The city feels deeply structured yet never rigid or oppressive. Every street, gate, and building seems positioned thoughtfully within a larger rhythm. Order emerges here through quiet coordination repeated patiently over long stretches of time. Beyond the city walls, roads continue outward toward farming villages, military outposts, and remote trade settlements. Grain, salt, iron tools, and official messages move steadily along these transportation networks supported by relay stations and organized administration. The Han government invests heavily in infrastructure connecting its territories together. Roads and canals become instruments of stability, carrying resources and information across distances too vast for individual communities to manage alone. You enter another government hall, where rows of clerks continue working beneath dim oil lamps late tonight. Brushes glide slowly across bamboo strips while wax seals cool beside carefully stacked documents. The atmosphere feels strangely meditative, despite endless administrative labor. Entire civilizations quietly depend upon patient people, willing to label storage containers accurately for decades without complaint. Outside, autumn wind moves softly through cypress trees lining the palace avenues. Their shadows stretch gradually across stone pathways beneath lantern light like dark water flowing silently downstream. Political authority during the Han Dynasty evolves through systems of education, administration, taxation, and trade rather than military conquest alone. The empire expands, but its lasting strength often comes from organization maintained patiently across generations rather than dramatic victories remembered briefly afterward. You continue walking through sleeping neighborhoods where tiled roofs gleam faintly beneath the stars. Families rest behind wooden shutters while distant watchmen patrol the streets at measured intervals. The city remains calm and carefully ordered beneath the enormous night sky. Somewhere nearby, tea cools forgotten beside unfinished paperwork, while ink dries slowly across official records destined for archives nobody particularly enjoys revisiting centuries later. Historians often describe the Han Dynasty as one of the foundational periods shaping Chinese political and cultural identity. Many systems developed during this era continue influencing governance, philosophy, infrastructure, and education long afterward. Yet tonight the empire feels surprisingly gentle. Its authority reveals itself quietly through roads maintained properly, canals flowing steadily, and records copied carefully beneath pools of warm golden lamplight after sunset. You pause near the outer gate, where merchants prepare quietly for another westward journey before dawn tonight. Silk bundles rest beside wooden carts while horses breathe softly within the cool night air. Trade continues tomorrow exactly as today, connecting distant regions through countless small exchanges repeated patiently across generations and shifting landscapes over time. Far above the city, stars remain fixed within ancient patterns, while lantern light flickers across tiled rooftops below tonight. The empire breathes steadily beneath heaven and earth, sustained through balance, routine, and quiet persistence. Roads extend toward deserts and mountain passes, while ink dries slowly upon bamboo records inside silent administrative halls nearby. You arrive in Constantinople as evening light settles gently across the Bosphorus, turning the water pale silver beneath drifting clouds. Ships move slowly through the strait, while gulls circle lazily above crowded harbor roofs. The city stretches across hills beside the sea with quiet confidence earned over centuries. Even from a distance, Constantinople feels less like a city and more like a meeting point between worlds. The harbors of Constantinople are carefully positioned to benefit from the natural currents flowing between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. Merchants from distant regions arrive continuously carrying grain, silk, spices, wax, timber, and wine through these waters. Historians often describe the city as the commercial heart of the Byzantine world. You quietly suspect harbor workers describe it more accurately as an endless parade of paperwork and very heavy barrels. You walk slowly along the waterfront where ropes creak softly against wooden docks dampened by sea mist. Sailors unload crates while traders negotiate prices beneath striped awnings fluttering gently in the breeze. The harbor never truly falls silent. Even late into the evening, footsteps, waves, and distant voices continue blending together like the steady breathing of a city that rarely fully sleeps beneath the fading sky. Nearby warehouses hold spices imported from distant eastern markets. The air smells warmly of cinnamon, pepper, clove, and damp cedar wood, darkened by years of sea air. Inside the storage halls, lantern light reflects softly against worn stone floors and heavy timber beams. Dust drifts lazily through golden light near the ceiling. Somewhere nearby, an exhausted merchant probably wonders why pepper somehow becomes more valuable than common sense. You continue uphill through narrow streets lined with Byzantine buildings, whose faded walls still hold traces of deep blue and red paint. Domes rise softly above the city, while church bells echo faintly through the cool evening air. The architecture feels layered and weathered, rather than newly polished. Constantinople carries its history openly, allowing centuries to gently across its surfaces without attempting to hide the passage of time. Ancient engineers designed much of the city carefully around terrain, sea access, and prevailing winds over time. Harbors connect naturally with markets and storage facilities, while defensive walls protect trade routes from threats. Infrastructure supports commerce and survival together. Even beautiful cities become practical when ships carrying valuable cargo arrive regularly each week. You pass beneath stone archways where warm lamplight spills across cobbled streets still damp from afternoon rain. Vendors close market stalls slowly while nearby taverns remain softly active beside the waterfront. The sounds never rise sharply. Instead, the city hums with low, steady rhythms carried gently through sea air and narrow alleys. Constantinople feels constantly alive, though never hurried, like tidewater shifting patiently beneath moonlight. Far above the harbor stands the great dome of Hagia Sophia, glowing faintly against the darkening sky. Completed in the 6th century under Emperor Justinian, the structure astonishes visitors for generations with its scale and engineering brilliance. Historians record that Justinian reportedly declares, "Solomon, I have surpassed thee." You quietly imagine exhausted construction workers responding internally with considerably less dramatic enthusiasm after carrying marble all day. Inside nearby districts, scribes record shipping inventories, while officials track taxes from arriving goods this morning. The empire's wealth depends on trade flowing steadily through waterways linking Europe and Asia. Political power emerges from geography as much as force. Whoever controls Constantinople guides movement through narrow channels where currents, ships, and empires meet beneath changing skies. You pause beside a seawall where waves strike stone gently in repeating patterns unchanged for centuries. Fishing boats rock softly within sheltered coves while lanterns flicker along distant piers. The Bosphorus current continues moving steadily beneath the city, regardless of human ambition above it. Water remains wonderfully indifferent to politics, continuing its quiet work while dynasties rise, negotiate treaties, argue endlessly, and eventually disappear altogether. As night deepens, you enter quieter neighborhoods where monasteries and homes overlook the harbor from elevated terraces. Olive trees sway softly behind stone walls while distant music drifts upward from taverns near the waterfront. The city feels suspended between land and sea, east and west, memory and motion. Constantinople survives through adaptation, adjusting carefully to changing pressures without entirely losing its distinctive rhythm or identity. Then slowly, almost like distant thunder fading across water, the year 1453 approaches. Historians describe the Ottoman siege lasting weeks beneath heavy cannons and mounting exhaustion within the city walls. Yet tonight the story arrives softly, without dramatic interruption. The fall of Constantinople feels less like an explosion and more like an old wooden door closing carefully during a windy afternoon beside the sea. You walk quietly through streets where uncertainty settles gently over markets, churches, and crowded homes this morning. Ships still arrive carrying grain and textiles as political control shifts around them. Families cook meals, merchants bargain, and harbor workers unload cargo. Ordinary life rarely pauses for history. Most people still need breakfast regardless of changing banners above buildings. After the city passes into Ottoman control, trade continues flowing through the Bosphorus almost without interruption. New rulers maintain harbors, markets, and transportation systems because the city's geography remains too valuable to neglect. Constantinople changes politically while preserving much of its economic rhythm. Infrastructure once again outlasts ideology. Water, trade, and practical necessity quietly continue working together beneath every shifting layer of empire and administration. You return toward the harbor where dawn softens the eastern horizon beyond the strait this morning. Seagulls drift above slowly moving ships while fishermen prepare nets beside damp stone piers. The city awakens beneath pale gray light across calm water. Nothing feels rushed despite centuries layered within streets. Constantinople breathes steadily beside the Bosphorus through constant movement. Domes glow faintly while harbor currents carry ships between distant seas today. Empires rise, transform, and fade beside these waters, yet arrival and departure continue unchanged. Waves touch seawalls generation after generation beneath drifting clouds and quiet winds. The city remains between continents, listening softly to endless water movement beneath fading sunlight and lingering stars above. You enter a Mughal garden just after sunset, while cool evening air settles gently across marble pathways and still reflecting pools. Water flows quietly through narrow stone channels, dividing the garden into perfect geometric sections, lined with cypress trees and flowering plants. The symmetry feels calming rather than rigid. Every path, fountain, and shadow appears carefully arranged to encourage stillness beneath the fading sky. The Mughal emperors of India draw inspiration from Persian garden traditions that symbolize paradise through order, flowing water, shade, and balanced design. Historians describe these gardens as places where architecture and landscape become inseparable from spiritual reflection. Straight water channels mirror the heavens above, while trees create quiet shelter from intense heat. Even the birds here seem to chirp with unusually refined and aristocratic restraint. You walk slowly beside a long reflecting pool where moonlight trembles softly across the dark surface of the water. Marble pavilions glow pale silver beneath the night sky, while distant fountains produce steady rhythmic sounds echoing gently through the gardens. The atmosphere feels suspended between nature and careful human design. Somewhere nearby, a gardener probably spends several exhausting hours daily preventing leaves from ruining perfect symmetry. The Mughal Empire expands across much of the Indian subcontinent, beginning in the 16th century under rulers such as Babur, Akbar, Jahangir, and Shah Jahan. Yet alongside military campaigns and political administration, the empire invests heavily in architecture, music, poetry, and urban planning. Cities become spaces not only of control, but also of beauty, reflection, and cultural blending sustained patiently over generations. You continue along cool marble walkways bordered by jasmine and rose bushes, releasing fragrance into the evening air. The water channels remain remarkably straight, guiding flowing water with mathematical precision through the surrounding gardens. Engineers carefully calculate gradients to maintain continuous movement without mechanical pumps. The quiet sound of flowing water becomes part of the architecture itself, softer and steadier than conversation drifting beneath distant arches. Nearby rises a marble structure crowned with smooth domes and delicate lattice windows carved in astonishing detail tonight. Mughal architecture blends Persian, Indian, and Central Asian influences into monumental yet intimate forms. Light filters through stone screens, shifting across polished floors. Ancient architects would likely feel overwhelmed visiting modern hardware stores with instant precision tools. The gardens surrounding these buildings serve both practical and symbolic purposes within the imperial landscape. Trees provide shade against severe summer heat, while water cools air through evaporation. Pathways guide movement slowly through courtyards and enclosed spaces. Urban planning considers emotional experience alongside function, shaping how people feel within carefully designed imperial environments. You pause beside a fountain where droplets strike the pool below with soft rhythmic sounds tonight. Moonlight reflects across white marble surfaces while warm wind moves through nearby trees. The stillness feels deep without emptiness. Across the empire, similar gardens connect forts, tombs, palaces, and cities through shared ideas of balance, continuity, and quiet permanence. After major conquests or leadership shifts, Mughal cities continue absorbing influences from multiple cultures rather than erasing earlier traditions. Persian calligraphy appears beside Indian floral motifs, while local craftsmanship shapes imperial architecture in regional styles. Cultural blending unfolds through daily collaboration. Empires often leave deeper marks through kitchens, gardens, and construction than through speeches. You continue toward a pavilion overlooking gardens where musicians once performed during evening gatherings beneath lantern light tonight. Court records describe poetry, string instruments, and songs reflecting nature, longing, and time. Artistic traditions evolve even in uncertainty. Somewhere nearby, a court musician likely spends years mastering compositions while wishing audiences applauded more enthusiastically. The cities of the Mughal Empire become centers of learning, craftsmanship, astronomy, and literature alongside administration and trade. Workshops produce textiles, miniature paintings, jewelry, ceramics, and carved stonework traded across enormous distances. Yet tonight, the city feels wonderfully calm beneath the stars. Daily life unfolds slowly through courtyards, marketplaces, gardens, and homes connected by quiet routines repeated beneath warm evening skies and drifting incense smoke. You enter a shaded courtyard where cool marble floors retain traces of the afternoon's fading warmth. Water echoes softly beneath nearby arches while lanterns flicker behind carved screens. The architecture encourages slowness almost deliberately, inviting people to pause rather than hurry forward. Time itself feels softened within these spaces. Even footsteps seem quieter here, as though the buildings politely request lower voices and gentler movement after sunset. Historians often focus on dynasties rising and declining across centuries, yet cities preserve more than political memory alone. Long after rulers disappear, gardens continue blooming beside old walls, while musicians preserve melodies carried across generations. Stone pathways remain worn smooth by ordinary movement. Daily life continues quietly, sustaining culture through persistent human effort. You sit briefly beside a reflecting pool where still water mirrors the moon above with near-perfect clarity. The surrounding gardens appear almost suspended outside ordinary time, while faint night insects hum softly beyond the walls. Somewhere in the distance, traders close market stalls, while families gather for evening meals beneath open courtyards. The empire itself feels less important tonight than the quiet persistence of shared habits and familiar spaces. As centuries pass, political authority shifts repeatedly across the Indian subcontinent through conquest, negotiation, and changing alliances over time. Yet Mughal artistic influence continues shaping architecture, music, language, and urban design afterward. Buildings survive, gardens are restored, and traditions adapt. Time does not erase everything equally. Some beauty remains resilient beneath dust and slow history. You continue walking beneath dark cypress trees while moonlight glides across flowing water channels beside the path tonight. Gardens remain silent except for fountains and wind moving through leaves overhead. Marble domes and courtyards hold centuries of memory without urgency. Cities remember victories, but also quieter lessons about living gently alongside time. Far beyond the garden walls, the larger city sleeps beneath drifting clouds and fading lantern light tonight. Water flows steadily through narrow channels designed by earlier generations. Conquests pass, rulers change, and borders shift beneath the world's turning. Yet these gardens remain calm beneath stars, their symmetry and flowing water whispering softly into the night. You arrive in Baghdad during the Abbasid era just before dawn, as the city rests beside the Tigris under fading stars. Lanterns glow softly along quiet streets, while pale sunlight touches domes and rooftops above sleeping markets. Even in silence, the city feels alive, sustained by knowledge, trade, and patient movement through time. During the 8th and 9th centuries, Baghdad becomes one of the intellectual centers of the world under Abbasid rule. Scholars gather within the famous House of Wisdom to study, preserve, and translate texts from Greek, Persian, Indian, and Syriac traditions. Mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy flourish quietly beside crowded markets and shaded courtyards. Civilization here grows not only through conquest but through careful listening and thoughtful reading. You walk slowly through a narrow library corridor where sunlight enters through small high windows cut into thick stone walls. Dust drifts lazily through golden beams, while shelves hold manuscripts copied carefully onto paper imported from China centuries earlier. The atmosphere feels almost motionless beneath the silence. Somewhere nearby, a tired scholar probably spends half the night searching desperately for notes misplaced beneath very important scrolls again. The invention and spread of paper transform intellectual life throughout the Abbasid world. Compared to parchment, paper allows books and records to be copied more efficiently across schools, libraries, and administrative centers. Knowledge begins moving more freely between regions connected through true trade routes and scholarly networks. Even ancient civilizations eventually discover that organizing information properly can become almost as powerful as building armies or fortifications. You continue deeper into the library, where scribes sit at wooden desks, translating ancient texts into Arabic. Works by Aristotle, Galen, and Euclid are preserved through this long translation movement. Knowledge survives slowly across generations through patient copying rather than sudden discovery or easier evening activities chosen instead. Outside the library, Baghdad awakens gradually beneath a pale blue morning sky. Merchants begin opening market stalls beneath large domed roofs designed to provide shade against desert heat. The smell of bread, spices, ink, and cedar wood drifts gently through the surrounding streets. The city feels busy, yet remarkably calm. Trade, scholarship, and administration blend together naturally like streams meeting quietly beside a riverbank. The Abbasid caliphs invest heavily in infrastructure, supporting both commerce and intellectual exchange throughout their territories. Roads, canals, bridges, observatories, schools, and hospitals contribute to the city's reputation as a center of learning and urban sophistication. Baghdad becomes famous for its libraries and medical knowledge. You quietly suspect medieval students still complain about difficult exams and overpriced writing materials with very familiar levels of exhaustion. You walk beside the Tigris River, where stone bridges connect districts beneath soft morning light. Boats drift slowly carrying textiles, grain, pottery, and manuscripts between neighborhoods. The river moves steadily through Baghdad, as it once did for earlier civilizations. Water links human communities regardless of language, empire, or shifting political authority above the banks. The famous round design of early Baghdad reflects careful urban planning shaped by administration, defense, and ceremonial order. Though later changing over time, its influence remains important in Islamic urban history. Streets, markets, mosques, and government centers connect through organized patterns. Cities often begin with someone studying a map while drinking something warm and slightly over-caffeinated. You pause beside a book market where manuscripts rest under shaded awnings this morning. Scholars browse works on astronomy, poetry, medicine, and mathematics, while merchants negotiate calmly. Knowledge circulates through ordinary exchanges repeated daily. Intellectual movements often depend on people continuing to buy books despite limited shelf space at home and changing priorities. As afternoon sunlight softens across the city, narrow alleys remain cool beneath high walls and hanging canopies. Water sellers move slowly through districts, while distant prayers echo across rooftops. Baghdad's rhythm balances movement and reflection. Life unfolds through repeated routines, allowing scholarship and commerce to coexist beside kitchens, gardens, workshops, and quiet sleeping courtyards throughout the city. Historians often describe the Abbasid period as a golden age of intellectual activity, yet the city itself remains grounded in ordinary practical systems. Bakers prepare food before sunrise while canal workers maintain water flow through irrigation networks supporting nearby agriculture. Physicians treat patients within organized hospitals connected to teaching institutions. Civilization sustains itself quietly through countless forms of labor rarely mentioned in royal chronicles or dramatic historical paintings afterward. You continue toward a shaded courtyard where students gather beside a teacher, reading softly from a manuscript, while birds flutter above the surrounding arches. The discussion moves slowly through philosophy and astronomy beneath drifting afternoon light. Learning here feels communal and patient rather than competitive. Somewhere nearby, one exhausted student almost certainly pretends understanding complex geometry while secretly hoping nobody asks difficult follow-up questions during tomorrow's lesson. As evening approaches, market activity gradually slows beneath the domed roofs lining the city streets. Lamps flicker warmly beside shop entrances, while merchants organize goods for another day ahead. Dynasties and rulers may change across centuries, but daily life continues with remarkable resilience beneath shifting political structures. Markets reopen, bread is baked again, and bridges continue carrying footsteps across the river beneath quiet evening skies. Night settles gently over Baghdad, while moonlight reflects across the Tigris beneath ancient stone bridges tonight. The city grows quieter but never truly silent. Water laps steadily against embankments while distant voices drift through cool air. The rhythm feels timeless as rivers continue flowing beside sleeping cities under patient stars overhead. You stop at the center of a bridge overlooking dark water moving below beneath cool wind tonight. Lantern reflections tremble across the current while arches carry soft air beneath your feet. Baghdad holds centuries of scholarship, trade, music, and routine layered together. The city survives through connection, curiosity, and shared knowledge across generations. Far into the night, bridges remain above the slow-moving river while markets sleep behind closed doors tonight. Within quiet libraries, manuscripts rest upon wooden shelves waiting for readers. The Tigris continues its endless flow beneath the city as it has for millennia. Baghdad breathes softly under stars, calm and luminous within desert silence surrounding it. You arrive at Angkor just as evening rain begins fading into soft mist above the forest canopy. Stone towers rise quietly between enormous trees, while water gathers along ancient pathways worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. The humid air smells of wet earth, moss, and flowering plants hidden within the jungle darkness. Even now, long after its imperial height, the city feels vast, patient, and strangely alive. At its peak, the Khmer Empire supports one of the largest urban populations of the pre-industrial world. Historians and archaeologists believe Angkor's enormous system of reservoirs, canals, and embankments helps sustain millions of residents despite unpredictable tropical seasons. Water management becomes the foundation of the city's survival. Civilization here depends less upon walls alone than upon understanding rainfall, rivers, and shifting monsoon patterns over generations. You walk slowly beside one of Angkor's massive reservoirs known as barrays, their surfaces reflecting dark clouds above the jungle. Engineers built these lakes to store water during wet seasons and distribute it during dry periods. The scale feels astonishing in silence, while officials quietly manage maintenance with familiar administrative exhaustion. The pathways ahead narrow beneath towering trees whose roots spill across stone walls like slow-moving rivers frozen in place. You continue carefully through corridors lined with carved figures softened by centuries of wind, rain, and humidity. Night insects begin singing through the forest, while distant birds call from hidden branches overhead. The soundscape feels endless, layered gently across the ruins like invisible drifting fog beneath moonlight. Modern satellite imaging reveals Angkor's hydraulic network extends far beyond visible temples across the landscape. Researchers suggest flooding irregularities, sediment buildup, and environmental pressure gradually strain the system over time. The city does not disappear suddenly. Instead, its balance weakens slowly through accumulated changes unfolding across generations beneath the dense tropical sky above. You enter a long gallery where carved stone walls still display scenes of processions, markets, dancers, and daily life from centuries earlier. The reliefs remain astonishingly detailed despite erosion and moss covering portions of the surfaces. Human activity once fills these corridors continuously with movement and conversation. Tonight, only the sound of dripping water remains, steady and soft as breathing within the enormous sleeping complex. The Khmer kings construct temples, such as Angkor Wat and Bayon, not only as religious monuments, but also as symbolic centers connecting heaven, earth, kingship, and the natural world. Architecture aligns carefully with cosmological principles and seasonal cycles, yet even these grand structures depend ultimately upon functioning water systems surrounding them. Empires, you begin noticing, often rely more heavily upon drainage engineering than dramatic speeches delivered from elevated platforms. You continue through shaded courtyards where moonlight filters softly between tree branches and broken stone towers. The roots surrounding the ruins do not feel violent or destructive tonight. Instead, they seem patient, slowly embracing the architecture over centuries with quiet persistence. Nature here does not rush. It simply continues growing carefully around abandoned walls, the same way ivy slowly overtakes forgotten garden fences after long seasons of neglect. As warm night air drifts through the empty courtyards, you imagine the city during its height when monks, merchants, craftsmen, and laborers move constantly through these spaces. Water channels carry supplies while incense smoke rises beside crowded temple entrances. Angkor once hums with extraordinary activity. Yet even at its busiest, the city remains deeply connected to rhythms of rain, sunlight, and seasonal flooding beyond human control entirely. Historians believe Angkor's gradual transformation involves multiple causes, including political shifts, trade changes, religious evolution, and environmental stress affecting agricultural systems. No single event empties the city overnight. Instead, populations slowly relocate while forests begin reclaiming structures left behind. Human absence unfolds gradually here. The jungle enters silently, one fallen leaf and creeping root at a time beneath the damp tropical air. You pause beneath a stone archway where cool moisture clings softly to the walls tonight. Small plants grow from cracks in carved surfaces, while distant thunder rolls beyond the trees. The atmosphere feels heavy yet calm, like sitting beside rainfall. A mosquito nearby studies you with surprising historical interest and determination. The canals surrounding Angkor once guided water through fields supporting vast rice harvests across the empire. Hydraulic planning ensured stability despite irregular monsoon seasons, yet such systems require constant labor and adaptation. Infrastructure behaves like gardens. Without attention, even impressive designs slowly yield to weather, time, and wandering roots over years. You continue deeper into the temple complex, where silence grows beneath enormous strangler fig trees tonight. Roots descend from above, while moonlight touches damp stone below. The scene feels transformed rather than abandoned. Forest and architecture now coexist together, layered gently through centuries of uninterrupted growth, merging nature and ancient human design. Archaeologists working at Angkor often describe discovering hidden structures beneath vegetation using airborne laser scanning technology called LiDAR. Entire neighborhoods, roads, and water systems appear gradually beneath the forest canopy through careful research and mapping. The city still exists quietly beneath the jungle, waiting to be understood again. History here resembles buried music, faint but continuous beneath layers of leaves and passing rainstorms. As midnight approaches, mist rises softly from pools beside fallen stones and broken terraces tonight. Frogs call from hidden channels, while insects fill the night air with rhythm. Courtyards stand empty, except for shadows. The city breathes quietly through water, roots, and stone, holding memory within deep tropical darkness surrounding everything. You stop beside a weathered staircase leading toward a tower wrapped in enormous roots tonight. Stone feels cool and damp from recent rain. Thousands once passed here beneath banners and music. Now wind moves through jungle canopy while leaves gather across abandoned paths and silent temple floors within fading moonlight. Far beyond the ruins, rain clouds cross the Cambodian sky as they have for centuries. Water still flows through surviving canals while trees grow between stones. Angkor remains between memory and forest under quiet stars. Even after empire fades, nature continues covering everything gently with rain, roots, leaves, and patient silence. You walk slowly across a quiet plain where fragments of ancient walls rise gently from dry grass beneath the evening sky. Once, this place stands at the center of trade routes, ceremonies, and political decisions, shaping distant territories. Now only low foundations remain beneath drifting sand and scattered stones. The silence feels soft rather than tragic, like a long conversation slowly fading into memory after midnight. Throughout history, many cities once considered permanent eventually decline into ruins hidden beneath deserts, forests, or open fields. Archaeologists continue uncovering forgotten streets, wells, workshops, and homes beneath layers of soil accumulated over centuries. Entire populations vanish gradually, while landscapes reclaim abandoned spaces with remarkable patience. Time, you begin noticing, behaves less like a conqueror and more like dust settling quietly across unused furniture. You pass weathered statues whose faces have nearly vanished beneath erosion from wind, rain, and repeating seasonal changes tonight. Marble eyes once carved by skilled hands now stare outward without expression in fading light. Nearby columns lean beside collapsed courtyards overtaken by grass. An ancient artist once worried deeply about preserving details, now almost unrecognizable. The ground beneath your feet contains layers from different civilizations built one above another across centuries. Ancient roads become foundations for later roads, while reused stones appear inside walls, constructed long after earlier empires disappear. Historians often discover identical building materials shared between societies separated by hundreds of years. Human beings repeatedly return to the same rivers, ports, and crossroads, guided quietly by geography more than memory. You continue walking beside a dry stone well surrounded by cracked paving stones warmed by the afternoon sun. Once people gather here daily carrying water jars, while merchants and travelers exchange news beneath nearby awnings. Now the well stands empty beneath drifting clouds and distant bird calls. The absence feels strangely peaceful. Even abandoned places continue holding traces of ordinary routines long after the voices themselves disappear entirely. Ancient maps displayed in museums often reveal how dramatically borders change through time. Kingdoms expand, divide, merge, and vanish while rivers continue flowing through the same valleys beneath shifting political lines. Looking closely at these maps feels almost meditative. You quietly suspect cartographers throughout history experience the same exhausted frustration modern people feel while updating phone software that immediately requests another update afterward anyway. You pause beside remnants of a stone roadway still visible beneath layers of dust and grass tonight. Wagons, soldiers, pilgrims, and traders once traveled this route, carrying grain, ceramics, fabrics, and stories between regions. Centuries later, other empires reuse it. Roads outlast rulers, serving whoever arrives next with determined footsteps. Farther ahead, the ruins of an old riverside harbor rest silently beneath reeds and shallow water. Historians discover evidence showing multiple civilizations using this exact location across different eras because the river naturally supports transportation and settlement here. Geography quietly guides human repetition across centuries. Empires may imagine themselves unique, yet many ultimately build cities beside the same reliable water sources and familiar fertile plains. You continue toward a collapsed marble hall where only broken columns remain beneath the open sky. Wind moves softly through the structure while evening shadows gather between fallen stones. Once, officials and rulers likely hold ceremonies here surrounded by banners, polished floors, and crowded audiences. Tonight, insects hum quietly through the grass instead. The transformation feels gradual and natural, as though the building simply grew tired and decided finally to rest. Historians studying ancient trade routes often notice how commercial systems survive political collapse surprisingly well. Merchants continue traveling familiar paths long after dynasties disappear because geography, resources, and practical necessity remain largely unchanged. Ports reopen beneath new governments, while markets reorganize themselves around surviving infrastructure. Human movement persists quietly through adaptation. Civilization behaves less like a single structure and more like water flowing steadily around shifting obstacles over time. You sit beside a fallen stone carved with inscriptions nearly erased by centuries of weathering tonight. The language once felt clear and authoritative to passersby. Now only fragments remain under lichen and dust. Meaning fades across generations, while officials still labor to preserve records against the fragile illusion of permanence. The evening sky darkens while cool wind moves across abandoned land carrying dry grass and distant rain. Ruins grow quiet after sunset as birds settle into trees. Yet silence feels layered rather than empty, holding echoes of footsteps, trade, labor, and daily human life accumulated gently across centuries of change. Archaeologists frequently uncover evidence that later civilizations reuse materials from earlier structures instead of building entirely new cities from nothing. Marble blocks, bricks, columns, and roads pass from empire to empire through practical necessity. Human history becomes strangely circular in this way. Even magnificent capitals eventually become convenient quarries for future builders searching for durable stone without unnecessary transportation expenses or difficult mountain excavation projects nearby. You continue walking beneath stars while distant ruins fade softly into darkness across the plain tonight. Towers and walls blur into natural hills beneath moonlight. Time erases boundaries between construction and landscape. Cities rise, exist briefly, then settle back into silence beneath wind, rain, and drifting soil over long passages. Beyond the ruins, modern towns continue beside ancient roads and rivers used thousands of years earlier. Children play near forgotten foundations, while farmers work fields around buried temples. Continuity feels gentle. People adapt to what remains nearby, building new routines quietly beside remnants of earlier worlds softened gradually by time itself. You pause at an old harbor shoreline where waves move steadily beneath pale moonlight as before tonight. Ships once carried goods, languages, and ambitions across seas here. Now only water moves while stones rest in salt air. The ocean remembers every empire equally and forgets each one with identical patient rhythm. Across the sleeping landscape, ruins from many civilizations rest beneath sand, grass, and fading constellations overhead tonight. Marble thrones crumble while roads survive beneath newer footsteps. Rivers continue toward distant seas. Empires resemble passing waves touching the same ancient shore. The world remains long afterward, quiet and unchanged beneath patient stars above. You stand once more beside a quiet river flowing slowly beneath an enormous night sky filled with pale, distant stars. The water moves gently across the dark plain, exactly as it does long before the first cities rise beside its banks. Cool air drifts softly through reeds near the shoreline. After thousands of years of empires and borders, the river continues forward without urgency, calm and almost perfectly silent tonight. When viewed through the scale of geological time, entire civilizations become astonishingly brief. Mountains rise and erode, while rivers alter their paths across valleys over millions of years far beyond recorded memory. Compared with such immense spans, kingdoms and empires resemble thin layers of dust settling quietly upon ancient stone. Human history feels large to us, yet remarkably delicate beneath the wider patience of the earth itself. You begin walking slowly along the riverbank, where damp soil reflects faint moonlight beneath scattered clouds. Somewhere far away, water touches stones with soft repeating sounds, barely louder than breathing. The night air carries almost no distinct noise now. Even the wind seems quieter here. It feels as though the world itself has slowed carefully, allowing every movement and thought to settle gently into stillness beside the dark water. Long before royal palaces, marketplaces, and walls appear across fertile plains, rivers already shape the land through steady repetition. Water deposits silt, nourishes plants, and creates pathways for migration, trade, and settlement across countless generations. Human societies emerge gradually beside these rhythms rather than apart from them. Even powerful rulers ultimately depend upon the same rainfall, fertile soil, and seasonal currents supporting ordinary farmers and fishermen nearby. You remember the cities visited throughout this long, quiet journey. The canals of Mesopotamia, the stone roads of Rome, the gardens of the Mughal courts, the harbors of Constantinople, and the silent reservoirs of Angkor all remain connected by water moving patiently through human history. Different languages, beliefs, and governments rise beside rivers that continue flowing steadily toward distant seas beneath changing constellations overhead every night. The boundaries drawn across maps shift slowly over centuries, while landscapes remain more constant beneath them tonight. Coastlines change, forests expand or retreat, and rivers carve deeper paths. Human borders seem permanent in their time, yet from afar they resemble temporary lines in sand before tides smooth everything again. You pause beside a shallow pool where stars reflect faintly on still water between reeds bending in the breeze tonight. Insects hum beyond the shoreline while leaves rustle softly in darkness. The atmosphere feels calm and stripped of urgency. Even frogs seem politely committed to maintaining quiet nighttime volume for travelers. Across centuries, people build cities because they gather near resources, trade routes, and familiar paths through land. Roads reconnect old settlements, while stones from earlier walls become foundations for new homes and markets. Nothing disappears fully. History folds into itself through adaptation, reshaping older forms into quieter versions over time. You continue walking beside the river while mist begins gathering low across the water beneath the fading stars. The current remains smooth and steady, carrying leaves silently downstream toward places unseen in the darkness ahead. There is comfort in this endless movement. The river asks nothing from the civilizations surrounding it. It simply continues following gravity and terrain through valleys older than memory beneath the sleeping sky above. Scientists studying climate history often examine ice cores, sediments, fossils, and ancient riverbeds to understand how environments change slowly across immense stretches of time. Human records cover only a tiny fraction of these transformations. Long before a written language exists, rain already falls upon mountains and rivers already search patiently for the sea. Nature keeps its own quiet chronology beneath every empire. Humanity briefly constructs beside flowing water. You sit quietly on a smooth stone near the shoreline, while cool night air settles across the plain tonight. Darkness feels soft rather than empty. An owl calls once in the distance before silence returns. Only water, stars, wind, and earth continue their ancient patterns beneath the slow-turning world above. Cities explored throughout this story fade like lanterns disappearing along a quiet road at midnight. Yet their influence remains within languages, architecture, mathematics, music, and memory across generations. Humans leave traces everywhere they settle. Even after collapse, learning, building, planting, and storytelling continue quietly within newer worlds that rise afterward. You watch the river as ripples spread across its dark surface beneath drifting moonlight tonight. Movement feels neither rushed nor dramatic. Water simply flows around stones, reeds, and bends along the shore. History behaves similarly. Empires rise and dissolve through gradual adjustments, unfolding silently beneath the visible surface of ordinary life everywhere. Night deepens while stars soften above the dark horizon tonight. Cool wind moves through grass with a sound almost too quiet to notice clearly. Downstream, unseen water continues its patient journey toward the sea, as it has for thousands of years. The world feels vast and calm beneath an endless sky above. You notice how peaceful the earth becomes when nothing demands attention anymore tonight. No armies march, no merchants trade, no kings command from marble halls. Only the river remains awake beneath stars, carrying reflections through darkness older than memory itself. Silence grows deeper than language, surrounding everything gently without end. The reeds along the shore sway gently, while faint mist drifts above the water like pale breath rising slowly into cool night air. Somewhere nearby, leaves tremble softly against one another before becoming still once more. The quiet now feels complete and comforting. Time itself seems to loosen gradually, allowing every thought to drift farther away until only distant water and soft darkness remain beside you. Far beyond the sleeping plain, rivers across the earth continue finding their way patiently toward the sea beneath changing skies and fading constellations. Cities, borders, thrones, and monuments will continue appearing beside their banks through centuries yet to come. Still, the water will move onward quietly through darkness and dawn alike. The script comes to a close. Thank you all for listening.